Hi guys, I once again screwed the audio up, so I'm going to have to overdub this particular video. This video is going to be on guard fits without a milling machine. I have here a already heat treated and somewhat polished knife blade ready to fit up a guard. The first thing I need to do is make sure that my shoulders are ready to receive the guard. A lot of your guard fit is in preparation, not in the final fit up. So you want to make sure that these are square and parallel to each other. To do that, I'm going to use this tool here, which is called a carbide file guide. These are pretty widely available. They're a really useful tool. You clamp this down and then you can grind or file down to the surfaces and don't have to worry about removing any material from the carbide, because it's hard enough to resist even ceramic belts. If you don't have one of these, I suggest you either buy or make a tool steel file guide, which is just two hardened pieces of steel that haven't been tempered back much, and you can use it in the same way, just only with files. You'll have to soften the ricasso. When you're setting this, you want to make sure you're setting this at the angle you want your guard to sit at. Whatever you sit those two lines at, those two shoulders at, that's where your guard's going to sit. So I generally try to square it up off the spine of the knife, or off of center line in case of, say, a dagger. Once I have that squared up and in place where I want it, then I will take that to the grinder and just grind down the two nubs to be even. Like I said, if I didn't have the carbide file guide, I would do this with a file, and just make sure that they're all the way down to the guide and flat across both sides. That'll make sure that that's sitting square. All right, I'm back, and you can see here that I have ground this down flush, and you can see that this is not even contacting the straight edge at all, with a slight radius in the inside corner that I made by rolling the belt over the edge of the platen. Just going to make sure these are fairly even, file, and clean up those little corners, make sure that all the edges are broken, and then this is ready to take off of the knife. So the next step after I get this file guide off is going to be to lay out the guard. I have those two shoulders now square and flat, and everything's ready to go together. This is a guard I started on this knife already, but it's a bronze. I think I'm going to restart and make one in, this is a 410 stainless, I believe. The first thing I'm going to do is scribe a deep center line. And that deep center line is important. I want to have a place to mark where all my holes need to go. So I'm going to use a carbide scribe in the straight edge. And it doesn't actually have to be centered. I just need to have them in a straight line. So you want to have a straight edge. Wherever this line is, that's the center your slot's going to be. You do a deep line. You want to make sure that this scribed in very deeply. I'm going to keep repeating that because it's important. Once you have that scribed in enough that you can actually catch a thumbnail in it, then it is ready to lay out the holes. So I'm going to check to make sure that I can catch the tip of the scriber in that scribed line, which very cleverly you can't see on the screen. But trust me, it's there. The next step is going to be to sketch on there the shape of my guard, just sort of a rough, kind of circular, oval, whatever I want, just so I know where I want it to sit on the knife blade. I've done that with a pencil in this case. Sometimes I use a Sharpie, doesn't really matter. Once I know where I want it to sit and I have it roughly laid out, I'm going to just mark the edges along that center line. Now, the next step is the only bit that's even a little bit of math. Once I have the end points of my slot, then I need to figure out what the thickness of my blade is. To do that, I'm going to use a pair of calipers. I like these dial calipers. These are my old machinist calipers. I've had those things forever. I'm going to measure off the top there, and in this case, it's just under 1/4 inch. So I'm going to start a little bit under that at 3/16. I want to leave enough room that I can file these holes square. So I don't ever want to go on size with my holes. The first thing, so I'm going to be at 3/16, so I want to split that number in half and put a mark half of that to the inside. I'm also checking to make sure the two sides of my ricasso are roughly parallel. If they're not, it's not a big deal, but I need to make sure that the smallest size is still going to fit within my block. Getting it square is a little better, and you can square that on a block like that, or you can put it in a surface grinder if you have one or whatever. In this case, it's only off by like 5 thousandths, so it should be fine. So I'm going to go half of my drill diameter, which is 3/16, so 3/32 in, and I'm going to put a mark. So about, yeah, right there. Yeah. Last one was 3/16 as well. Okay. So 3/16 in, and I'm going to put a little mark, and then, 3/32 in, and then 3/32 in on the other side. And then I'm going to split the center of those two lines and put one more mark in the middle, which should be roughly 3/16 over, hopefully. So I don't know if you can see in this, there's a center mark, edge of my slot, center marks where I'm going to center punch my lines. So now I'm going to center punch the 3/32 over lines and the center hole. So I want to back this up a little bit and use my bench block here. So I'm going to center punch. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to catch the center punch in that deeply scribed line. And then all three of my center punch holes are going to be in the same plane. So now my holes will all line up. So first one, like that. Remember, when you do a center punch mark, only hit the center punch once. Don't hit it multiple times. Get one firm, swift hit instead of a bunch of little ones, because otherwise it tends to bounce out of the location. If you need to shift it, you can, but you need to shift it intentionally, not just by bouncing it. All right, so now I have all three of these, and I'm going to move to the drill press and drill out the outer two holes first. I don't care if the center hole gets drilled all the way. I'd like to drill it out. It makes my life easier. But if I can't drill it out all the way, I can very easily file between the two holes to create the slot. On the other hand, extending down to the third hole is kind of a pain, and a lot of times goes sideways and you end up scrapping the guard. So do the outer two holes first, then the center hole. Always. All right, moving over to the video, or to the drill press. All right, I'm getting ready to drill. I have a couple blocks of wood underneath here so that I can support this high enough up that I can grab with the actual jaws instead of underneath it to get a firm grip on that. I want to make sure it's pressed into the wood. That just helps keep it from destroying my drill press vise as well. I don't normally use oil, but since this is stainless, I'm going to just use a touch of Tap Magic cutting fluid. It helps keep the bits from screwing up. You want to use an appropriate speed, fairly quick, because it is a fairly small drill bit. I'm going to drill the outer two holes first. So first hole is going to be, all right, there we go, right through, boom. And then the absolute other side next, so that I've drilled the outer perimeters of the slot first. Catch the center punch mark, and right through. Nice sharp drill bit. Now then, I'm going to try to get the middle one, and we'll see what happens. I don't think I can actually get it because it's kind of near. I'm going to drill as much of it out as I possibly can, and then the drill's probably going to walk into the other hole. Let's see. Oh, there it goes. Yep. Oh, that's what we got. We got 2.5 holes. So that's not a big deal. I've removed most of the material from the middle, and filing that out will go really quickly. All right, so now I'm ready to file this out. I'm going to put this in the file, or in the vise, in the direction I want to file downward. That makes it easier to keep a straight line. I'm going to line this vise up with my shoulder so that I'm filing straight away from myself and not trying to file at an awkward angle. I'm going to use a 1/8 inch or 3/16 chainsaw file and just file straight down. You'll notice I'm removing pressure on the way back and just kind of letting the file drag through the hole and putting downward pressure a little bit on the way forward so that the file cuts efficiently without worrying about breaking the file. It gets a little snug going through the backside where the two holes get narrow. I've now created the slot. There we go. That was pretty quick. So now I need to file the sides down to the edge of my holes. And I'm going to switch to a pillar file or a flat file. First I'm going to use this little 1/2 by 6 inch mill file and just sort of square those up, and then once I can fit this pillar file in there, which has 2 safe sides, then I can square everything up. I need to find the handle for this. Nope. Or not. Or there's one that was completely empty. Look at that. Oh, yeah, handle. Alright. A little more with this guy. Using the larger, stiffer file is good once you can get it in there. But you need to be able to, get down there with that smaller file first. And flip over and just take a little off the other side. My goal is to get down to flat all the way across. I know I have a little bit of room on both sides, so I want to go to flat first. And once I'm down to flat, then I'll start to check the knife blade in there to make sure that I'm not filing too much off. And I'm trying to stay as square to the knife as possible. It does look like I'm angling in this picture. I think that's just the angle of the camera. And flipping over and working the other side too. And I'm also at this point squaring up the corners where the drill is as best I can, so that the end of the hole is kind of rectangular into the slot. There we go. So now I'm going to start to check this. Obviously I need to remove more material. See where it's catching. In this case it's the sides. So I'm going to remove material from the sides. This is where we want to make sure that our tang is tapering in both dimensions. That way it's much easier to catch, see where it's hitting, and know where you need to take off material without removing too much. It's really the only way to get a good fit is to have the tang at least drafted by a few thousandths. It doesn't have to be a lot of taper, but it does need to have some taper. Just taking your time on this. So I'm about halfway up. And I'm going to file this until it's almost all the way up. Maybe within a 1/4 inch. 1/2 inch to the top, something like that. Yeah, just double checking to make sure my tang is tapering, which it is. And then that way I know nothing is going to catch and hold my tang up and give me a gap when I get to the ricasso. Notice I'm flipping over and back and forth so that I'm trying to keep the slot as evenly as possible. Removing material from both sides as evenly as I can. And trying to keep it square. and parallel sides. There we go. We're almost there. And I want to just start seeing, I think it's probably going to catch on the end points now. A lot of times that's where that starts to catch rather than the sides. So I'm going to take a little more off the inside, and then I think I need to take off the ends. I can see little scuff marks when I slide that up in there, and those scuff marks will give me some indication of where I need to remove material. You can paint the tang with a Sharpie as well, and that can help transfer over and tell you where you need to at least take material off by where it's scraping off the Sharpie. Looking at a light source to see where that's contacting. And remove material where it's contacting right now. Slowly and carefully. You don't want to remove too much material at this point. Use a file card so you don't get pilling. A little more. Just a little more. Now I'm going to change the endpoints with a needle file and radius the inside corners to take up for that radius I put in before. Then first I'm going to use a little square file, and then I will use a safe-sided file that I made by taking a square file, I'm going to use a triangular file first, just cut this in carefully, and then I will come in with a square file that I have taken two sides off of, so that I can just come right up to that edge and not really remove any of the shoulder where I don't want to remove material. But I just need to create enough relief that when I push this guard up into place, I'm not going to split or catch on these shoulders, or possibly split out and shear the bottom. I've actually had that happen where I forced it up and those two radiuses sheared the guard and put two projections down. That's my safe side file. You can see the two shiny areas of the safe sides. I put those safe sides up against the edge of the slot, and then I can square up that corner and just follow that line down. Turn that around to the other side. Tedious, isn't it? It looks like it's pretty good. I'm going to set this up. Maybe take one more pass with a file. Just square up those corners there. Square up those radiuses in line with the rest of the slot. Alright. Now, I want to make sure that the face of this guard is flat. So I'm going to put it on the block with some sandpaper. I always leave a little piece of sandpaper glued to the block to make sure this is flat, flush. And the flatter you get this, the easier it'll be to fit up against the shoulders, which we know are flat because they were on the surface, or they were ground down to the file guide. And making dust, making dust, making more dust, and making more dust. The 410 cuts pretty fast, so that's not too bad. Once I have a full surface, I'm ready to move on to the next step. Seating the guard. So what I'm going to do is put this in the vise with a piece of leather around it and the soft jaw so I don't screw up the knife blade. And nice firm grip on it and drop the guard in place. And I'm going to use a pusher, not that pusher, and I have to get the right pusher, which is in the other room. So I will do that now. Alright, so I've found the proper piece to go down, and it's going to be able to reach all the way down and not interrupt on my tang. And this is just a flattened piece of pipe that's kind of squared off on the tip. There's a ton of these floating around the shop. And that one will work perfectly for this. So now I'm going to just hammer this straight down onto there. There we go. Well, apparently that was not going to work perfectly for this. But we can make that fixed. Look. Now it will fit perfectly. Haha! Alright. Something doesn't fit, get a bigger hammer. Alright, so now you can see I'm almost down. I still have a little gap on each side. And I can see where this is sitting. So now I'm going to tap this off. This is on here pretty good. And I'm going to file off the corners to remove the pieces that are obstructing this from going up into seating in place. I'm going to go back to the same set of files I was using to radius these corners earlier, which of course now are hidden. I also have a nice flat pillar file that I like to use for this. Very little, tiny one. Works great. And just filing off a radius for that corner so that I can go all the way up in place. Flip it over, do the other side. I think I spend more time looking for the right file than I do actually using the right file. Alright, there we go. I'm just trying to stay as straight line with the edge of the hole there and radiusing it down, opening that up so that I can seat this all the way in. Alright. You can see the radius there. A little bit more. I'm going to try to bring that radius back pretty far, farther than the radius actually is, because if I have a little relief under there, that's all to the good when I go to glue this knife up. It'll give a place for glue to kind of get trapped and expand out so it doesn't push the garden and keep it from seating all the way. I've had that happen before where I had a perfect fit and then I glued the knife up and epoxy got into my perfect fit and it was no longer a perfect fit anymore. Now I had a gap with an epoxy line underneath it, which was sort of annoying. Actually, not sort of annoying. It made me swear a lot, but that's okay. It's a shop. I swear a lot anyway. Alright. This is back to that save file again. There we go. Alright, so now I have those two radiused in. We're going to go back to the leather, clamp this back in place. Nice tight bite on this. And drop this back on. And keep an eye on it. All right. Looks like we're seated on one side, but not the other. So now I tend to tip this over a little bit. Tip it, give it a little couple whacks, try to push that corner down. There we go. And you may need to take this back off and remove a little more material. Oh, like a pretty good fit. Now I have a visual, I can see where it's hitting in those corners there. There's little like kind of sheared marks. So now I can go back and remove those. Again, using my safe side file. And very carefully remove all that material. I am sorry, this is such a boring thing to watch. It's not much more fun when you're doing it either, just so you know. Although when you get it fit, it's kind of satisfying. It's no gap. And incidentally, I do this part even if I mill the holes in. I end up going back and filing this whole section in afterwards, whether or not I've ground it or not. I mean, whether or not I've milled the hole or drilled it, I end up doing this fitting portion the same. Just the initial slot gets fit on the milling machine. And there's a little bit less filing for the sides because I can mill the slot on size, but otherwise it's the same. That looks pretty good. Alright, we're going to make a kitchen. And it's really just placing it back on there, seeing where it's catching, removing that material, putting it back on the knife, and not taking too much. Alright, and we're going to hammer this up again. Drop that back down. Okay. Now this is a center punch to just expand the edge of the hole in the back, because I have a little gap, so that I don't want this to shift. And it tends to help it set in a little bit. The material is soft enough when I'm doing this, I can actually get a little bit of an undercut all the way around the guard fit. And this is really just on the inner edges, and over where the shoulders are. This is a fun trick. I'm going to flatten this off again. Sometimes that burr will actually come up and keep it from seating all the way. And now I'm going to take a carbide scribe and just rub the edge where it's meeting and just burnish that down a little bit. I've polished the surface of the front of the carbide just so I can do this. And by doing that, I just expand it a few thousandths. It's not much. Maybe a half a thou. Just enough to get this to completely disappear. I can run down that corner with the scribe, like that, like that. And now all you'll see is a shiny line through that center. You can't see a gap because there is no gap. Completely closed up and fit.